Hi, everyone. This is the DIY marketing for CBOs Lunch and Learn for the Massachusetts Community Health and Healthy Aging Funds grantees. My name is Kit Spee. I use the she, her pronouns. I'm a senior communications associate here at HRIA, and I'm going to let my colleague Kira introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kira. I use the she, her pronouns, and I'm a communication associate here at HRA.
And today we're going to give a brief overview of marketing and talk about how it can help you enhance your projects and getting the word out about your projects. We'll talk about understanding your audiences and your goals, creating compelling content, what communication channels are available for you to use. And then we had some discussion in an earlier unrecorded session. So I will get started with a brief overview of marketing and how it can help community-based organizations. It allows you to showcase the impact of your work, raise awareness, build recognition and trust, and increase community engagement. We're going to be threading through an example project today to help illustrate the concepts that we'll be talking about. This project was called Wheels of Hope. It was a service of the Massachusetts Substance Use Helpline, and it provided free transportation to people in the Merrimack Valley who were seeking detox, residential treatment, sober housing, and medication for addiction treatment services to facilities anywhere in Massachusetts. It was a 6-month pilot program with community partners, the Merrimack Valley Project and Lucos Transportation. And then we did eventually secure additional funding to continue the service through December of 2021. This was a project with a very limited budget, so we had to be thoughtful about how we did the marketing to ensure that we were using the majority of the funds for the actual administration of the project, so giving rides and setting up the phone service and things like that. So generally when you start your marketing, you're going to start by creating a marketing plan, and that is a strategy that you put in place over a specific period of time. It defines what your organization does, describes your product or service, and is tailored to reach your audience, convey your message, and achieve your organization's goals. A lot of the times, if you look online, you'll see sort of not complicated, but very prescribed ways to create marketing plans. But the most important things that you need to consider are your audiences, so who you're communicating to, your messaging, which is what you want to say, and your communication channels. So that's how you want to say it. So rather than follow that prescribed format, you can just think of those 3 things.
So we'll start with the first one, understanding your audience and your goals. That's probably the most important way to get started. And you'll do that by first segmenting your target demographics. So basically understanding who your audience is. And any way you can get this information, whether that's, surveys, Google, however else, just really knowing your community. But you want to focus on demographics like age, gender, location, income level, education level, really any information you have on your audiences. And then you want to start to think about what their needs are and how your organization can meet them, how they prefer to receive information. So what channels you can use to communicate with them, how they prefer to hear things, get messages from you. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. And then you'll use all that information to tailor your messages to resonate with your audience. So a few things that are really helpful are creating personas and doing research. So even if the research is just Google, it doesn't need to be anything fancy like surveys. If you don't have the time or capacity or money to do that, you can just Google and gather information about your audience's habits and preferences. And then something else that's really helpful is creating personas. So writing profiles, for example, of your ideal consumers, customers, including demographics, behaviors, their preferences, to really put yourself in their shoes and think about things the way that they might think about things. So just using Wheels of Hope as an example here, our audiences were people actively using drugs and people in early recovery who needed transportation to their services, treatment providers, and other referrers, so health and social service providers, case managers. Marketing goals. This is another really important thing. You want to make sure you're really clear on your goals. And what we use here is SMART goals. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. And if you're setting SMART goals, that's just one way to make sure your goals are really clear, they're achievable, and you're aligned with your organization's mission and values. So I'll just get into it here. You're going to decide what you specifically want to accomplish with your marketing efforts, determine what metrics you'll use to measure whether you've met your goal or not. Use your metrics to determine what is an attainable goal, understand why you have chosen your goal and how it's relevant to your mission, and choose a realistic time frame in which to achieve your goal. So you can see all of that here in action with our original goal for Wheels of Hope, which was from January 20th, 2020 to June 30th, 2020. Wheels of Hope will provide 50 rides to treatment by building awareness of the service through communication activities targeting providers, referrers, and helpline audiences, including people who are actively using drugs or in early recovery.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about creating compelling content. So really taking that audience information that you've gathered and your key messages and your goals and pulling it together to create content. So storytelling is really important when you are communicating about your project. You want to make sure that you're giving people a narrative that moves them, because stories have the power to captivate, inspire, and drive meaningful action. And you can gather those stories from the communities that you serve, whether that's through written testimonials, video testimonials, social media, or other user-generated content. And you can use those narratives to connect with your audiences emotionally. There are some free and low budget tools that you can use to create content. If you're looking for graphic design options, you can use Canva or iStock, writing, Grammarly or Hemingway Editor, audio, Audacity or Anchor, and animated videos, Powtoon and Animaker. So just an example of how we created a document to support and ask for additional funding at the conclusion of the Wheels of Hope pilot. It was a simple document created in Microsoft Word, so nothing fancy, nothing expensive, no, graphic designer or anything like that. And it was mainly a narrative recounting of the history of the service that highlighted the impact that we were able to make during the pilot phase. It wove through the story of the beginning of COVID-19 in Massachusetts and how successful partnerships between us and the transportation partner and our community partner really moved things along, even though we were sort of experiencing a lot of the same problems that others were experiencing during the early days of COVID. It demonstrated success of the pilot through data. We gave the number of rides given during the pilot phase and the percentage of callers from the Merrimack Valley area who requested a ride to treatment. We made sure that it spoke to the Helpline and Wheels of Hope values of respect, care, compassion, and community. And we included provider testimonials that spoke to the positive impact that the program had on them and their clients and how it made their jobs easier, and they had fewer worries about making sure their clients were able to get to treatment that they wanted. So we're going to move on to key messages now, and those are the big picture whys of your organization. They help you keep your communication with your audience consistent over time and across communication channels. we talked a little bit earlier about, your target audiences, and you may have different audience groups. So you want to keep those core messages consistent across audience groups, but you can tailor them a little bit to make sure that you're effectively speaking to each group. But you want to keep your key messages at the center of that content. So that means thinking about the goals of your organization, as well as your mission and values. You can use those goals to develop a few key messages, no more than 3 to 4. Keep them really simple. There's a resource here, a Mighty Cause blog post that can kind of give you a little bit more information about walking through how to craft those messages. And the messages that we created for Wheels of Hope were: everyone who wants substance use treatment deserves access to it. People seeking treatment and providers should not encounter transportation as a barrier to treatment, and transportation to treatment should be free, safe, and confidential. So those key messages really, they talk about what we believe, what we value, and just kind of they're like the essence of the brand or the project, essentially.
And just to add, this came up in the session earlier today that we forgot to record, but plain language is really important to keep in mind, and we can add some links here or send them in the email with the slides, but you generally want to keep the reading level to between 5th and 7th grade, just to make sure everything is accessible to all of your audiences. So you can, again, tailor that to your audience. For example, if you're speaking only to providers, your language is going to be a little bit different than if you're speaking to a larger community, but that's something to keep in mind when developing your messages as well. So last but not least, we're going to talk about communication channels. Communication channels are basically just how you send information and messages to your audiences. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. Here are a few. We've got social media platforms. So that's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, Nextdoor. Nextdoor, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with it, but there's a bunch of different apps like this. It really depends on what your community uses. So they're basically just networking apps for geographical neighborhoods. So if you're focusing on a specific location, a town, a neighborhood within a town, a smaller community, that's a really good way to get in touch with that demographic. Email newsletters. MailChimp has free and low-cost plans and a discount for nonprofits. So that's one way to get news blasts out to a list of people if you have their email addresses. Websites and blog articles, print materials, and paid advertising. So Facebook ads, Google ads, etc. Determining the right marketing channels will help you make sure you're reaching the right target audiences. That can be tricky. Instead of just blasting your message out to the world and hoping it finds the right people, you want to choose channels that align with where your audiences spend their time and how they prefer to consume content. So you can consider each channel's characteristics and then match them with your audience's needs and behaviors. So for example, younger audiences might prefer Instagram or TikTok to Facebook, while professionals might be more active on LinkedIn. And if you're focusing on a town or a specific geographical location, you can look for things like the Nextdoor app or Front Porch Forum, another similar app. Or you might want to use print materials and face-to-face outreach. Low-cost opportunities to expand reach and engagement within the community. So there's a couple different things you can do here. We brainstormed a few of the big ones, but first is establishing a strong online presence. And one way to do that is through social media. So you want to create a strategy, and interaction and consistency are really key here in building trust, engagement, and just becoming a general authority figure in your field in these spaces. One way to do this is to use a content calendar and schedule your content through social media apps directly or through the free plan of a scheduling site. And this is one way to make sure you're posting pretty consistently and you're carrying out that strategy. building partnerships and collaborations within the community. So collaborating on events, campaigns, initiatives, basically just leveraging each other's networks for mutual promotion. And then using outreach experiences and opportunities to strategically share your marketing materials. So community events, community bulletin boards, local schools and universities, virtual events and webinars, basically places that you can go and distribute things in person and work on building relationships face to face. So here is how we did that for Wheels of Hope. We communicated about this program in a few different ways, including outreach emails. So that was to providers and community-based partners, outreach presentations where we'd go and talk about the program and share information, brand messengers, Wheels of Hope landing page. So we had a landing page on the Massachusetts Helpline website where people could go for more information. That was also helpful for when we were doing outreach. We could refer people to the webpage. Organic and paid social media. So organic social media is just, regular posting on Facebook or Twitter, whereas paid social media is when you pay for advertisement. Printed materials, so flyers, wallet cards, taxi decals, and then we also had a press release. We have a Padlet that people can drop questions in as well if you don't feel like coming off mute. Let me pull the link up. That should work. And feel free to drop questions in the chat as well.
So we have a question in the chat about how much do Facebook ads typically cost?
That is a great question. So there's two different ways that you can do promoted Facebook posts. One is called boosting. So if your organization has a Facebook page that you post on occasionally, you can boost that post. It is a very low cost. It might be like a couple of dollars or something. And then for more of like an actual ad campaign where Facebook kind of decides where to run it and when to push it based on their algorithm and their audience, the audiences that you specify to Facebook, that can be more expensive. And I couldn't really tell you the cost. That's not something that we do a lot just because we typically don't have big marketing budgets. But that information should be pretty easy to find. Well, not easy to find, but it should be available somewhere in Facebook in their like ad center. I do find that it's a little confusing in the back end of their ad platform. I don't know, Kira, if you have more of an idea of cost.
No, I think I know exactly what you know.
Okay, great.
Joe, go ahead.
Oh, actually, before you go, Joe, I just wanted to also add some context. I think they're both pretty low cost. Like I would say $20-ish, depending on how many times you want that paid post to be posted. So you can do like every week for the next month or something like that. So if you do something every day for maybe 3 months, that costs a little bit more. So it's really more targeted, and it's probably really good for like specific campaigns or an event or something like that. Whereas when you want to boost a post, maybe it's like something really great happened for your coalition or your partnership, and you want to make sure people know about that, and then it also brings them in to start following you and gain that trust. So like boosting a post is really cheap, especially if something already great that you're sharing that you just want more people to know about. Hopefully that also provides some context. They're both generally low cost. Joe.
Thank you. Yeah, and I don't mean to be too nosy, but you did mention that this uh, program no longer exists. What were some of the reasons why it doesn't exist, still exist?
So yeah, it was a pilot phase that we had gotten funding from. I can't recall. I believe maybe there was an earmark for it. So we had those 6 months of the pilot phase, and then we kind of had to make the case for getting additional funding. Um, which we were able to secure, but that too was like a limited time. And we just, after that second round of funding, we weren't able to get further funding. So we had to pause the rides. I think we're always kind of, in whatever way we can, lobbying for more funding for that program, because it was a really valuable service that helped a lot of people. We gave, I think in the end, after like maybe a full year, we had given around maybe 350 to 400 rides. So it was a service that was really getting used a lot, but we've just been having trouble getting additional funding for it.
Hmm. So the need is there. The need still exists, but
Yes, I would say.
and you're also saying a lot. It's contingent upon public funding because you're not able to gain sufficient private funding to make it sustainable.
Yeah, it's a technically a service of the Massachusetts Substance Use Helpline, which is a publicly funded line.
Got it. So when you're talking about the marketing side of this, you are really talking more about use to the market that you have, as opposed to trying to raise resources to support it.
Yes, it was a new service, so we really needed to build the awareness within the Merrimack Valley community that this was available for them and something that they should take advantage of, because if we weren't doing that, we would also then have trouble demonstrating the need for the project.
Well, actually, I think it's a great need, specifically for the population we serve, are unaccompanied adult homeless, and you know they rarely have any resources, and agencies are you know paying out cab vouchers and things like this to transport people. But I think it is actually would be a great resource and a great service. I was just curious as to why, but generally you are marketing to your market that was people and groups that would actually use the resource and the service.
Generally, yes, although when we were coming to the end of that pilot phase, we were putting out asks for additional funding to other organizations. So that service update document that I talked about, that was a piece to support and ask for additional funding.
You didn't get, the programs didn't kick in, or if they did,
Another
not much.
program did kick in for the next 6 months.
Oh, okay.
But it was a set amount of funding, and as we continued to give more rides, we were spending out the money faster, basically.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Of course.
What recommendations would you have for folks who use less traditional forms of less traditional channels? Not social media, but maybe radio or flyers or in-person methods?
I think if you are using less of the traditional advertising methods, you want to make sure that you have a strong
I don't know.
well, like print ads or anything like that. I think that's usually considered like traditional marketing. So if you are relying less on those because of cost or just capacity to pull those together, you want to make sure that you have a really strong outreach strategy. So knowing your neighbors and knowing like-minded organizations, and making sure that you are connecting with them as much as possible. I'll talk about another project, well, more about the helpline. We have a program called the Helpline Champions, where it's anyone can be a helpline champion, whether you're in recovery or actively using, or you're a provider or a family member. Anyone can be a helpline champion, but it's a network of individuals who spread information about the helpline in their specific communities. And it's a really valuable way for us to make sure that we are maybe reaching communities where we don't do as much traditional advertising, like where, you know, our billboards wouldn't appear or something like that. And the helpline does typically have a bit of a bigger marketing budget, but our outreach is really, really important and valuable. And yes, paying people when you have the ability to do that is really important. We do believe that people should be paid for their work to, you know, help you build that community. We have offered stipends to the champions in the past. We have heard a lot of the time, and Kira and I are not directly involved in the champions program as much because we have a whole outreach team. But what we've heard is that a lot of the people who are helpline champions are like, I don't want to be paid for this because I love doing it so much. But that's not always the case. And so we should definitely pay people for their work.
I just want to answer a comment in the chat really quick. Whitney asked about the Nextdoor app. Can anyone share more about how this is used to connect and outreach? Yes, so the Nextdoor app, there's a few different ones that are used in different communities. So for example, for the Vermont helpline, the help link, we actually use something similar called Front Porch Forum because that's what's used more in Vermont. But I know there are neighborhoods and areas around here in Massachusetts that use Nextdoor. So you kind of need to do some research and see what's used more in your community. But it's a social networking app specifically for neighborhoods. So you can do paid advertising there, which is what we've done in the past. It's kind of like Facebook, you know, you pay for ads and you pay based on, you can boost your post, or you pay based on impressions, clicks, all of that. Or you can just post organically. So you join a neighborhood on the Nextdoor app and you post, and that's a great way to build relationships and connect with your neighbors or the people who are physically located near you. Yes, good for the gossip, for sure.
I just want to call out in the chat that it was mentioned that faith leaders can be a really great way to get information out to certain communities. So, you know, if you know that you are speaking to an audience that is, you know, heavily involved in their faith community, connecting with those leaders can be a really great way to make sure that people get the information that you are trying to get to them.
In addition to questions that people have, would folks also like to share some communication strategies that are working really well for them?
Hi, this is Calpurnia Roberts. I can say what's worked best for us, or one area that's worked well for us, is reaching out to the grantees. We have sub-grantees, and meeting with them in person. So site visits, actually having opportunities to spend time with them, talk with them face to face, I think has been really essential for us in building that trust and the partnerships. I find that as a result, they respond to our emails quicker. they respond to our phone calls faster, and that there's more time, attention paid to the conversations that we're having and the content that we're delivering.
Yeah, that face-to-face communication can be so important to really strengthen your relationships. Christine, it looks like you have your hand raised.
Hi, thank you, Kit. I was just going to also say what I find helpful is topic-based outreach. So say, for example, if we're hosting something that is geared towards men, I'll reach out first to Boy Scouts, fraternities, the men's group in churches, so that it gets a little bit more specific. And I know that whatever that thing is of specific particular interest to those communities or those community groups, and approach them as partners, and then obviously spread out to the wider community. But that has worked well for us.
Yeah, that's a great example of targeting your messaging.
For like those social media, when you're what am I trying to say? When you're scheduling your posts and things, how often do you think is good to post? And should it be like structured, so like Tuesdays you do certain kinds of content and Thursdays you do another kind of content? Like what does that look like if you do want to kind of try to be more planful about that, because it does take a lot of time to do the posting? How might you organize yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I think something that people really, really underestimate is the amount of time that it can take to have a consistent social media strategy. And that's why we definitely love to schedule our posts, just because, that's one way to make sure you're doing it and the posts are getting out. And you can kind of get ahead with it. So if you have some free time, go in and schedule a couple weeks in advance. But consistency is really what's important in kind of building your presence online, and people look to that to see if they can trust you and how they want to engage with you. So I don't know, Kit, feel free to chime in if you've got any specific thoughts on what types of things to post regularly. I just think as long as you are posting regularly, it depends on how many messages you're trying to get out. If you've got 3 key messages, you can post 1 a week on the same day every week. It really is dependent on your goals.
Yeah, I think so. Kira is really our social media person. But back when I was doing social media posts for the helpline, I had kind of structured it as like informational, like I would categorize the types of posts that we were doing. So there would be like an informational post about substance use disorder, or like substance use treatment options, or recovery supports. And then there would be typically like a more kind of direct call to action kind of post, like call the helpline or something like that. And then because one of our audiences was providers, we would also have posts for providers that were like talking to them about how the helpline could be useful for them. We have a portal on the back end of the site where they can like update their waitlist information and stuff like that. So we would sort of target our posts to different audiences, but also schedule them in a way that worked with those categories. So for example, like on Monday we'd do the informational post, on Wednesday we'd do the call to action, on Friday we'd do the provider post, and the content would be different each week, but it would be like it within those same categories.
Yeah, and I'll just add, even though we still do this, have a one post that's specifically a call to action, it does help to include a call to action in all of your posts, even if it's just an informational, you're trying to make people aware of something or educate them on something, including a specific, follow this link, call this phone number, check this out, gives them an action, something to do, and it also helps you measure engagement. Oh, Alexis?
Yeah, I have, I guess, two, they're not really they're like thoughts, but they're thoughts that lead into questions. One thing that just kind of stands out about everything that's been shared so far is just audience, and just kind of, tailoring your message for your audience and kind of being aware of like, okay, who are the different audiences that we're wanting to reach with this? And the two thoughts that come to mind that I guess lead to questions are, one, like just, I guess, language accessibility. I know one of the things in that document that you had shared out, Jamia, included just language around like common mistake being, using language to communicate about like programs, policies that people who are working and in the weeds know, and not really thinking about the broader audience. And we were just in kind of like a communications coaching call the other day where I think they had shared the standard of like, you really should be using language that's accessible at like a 7th grade reading level. And even that is a little high now. It really should be closer to a 5th grade reading level. And so I guess my first question, I'm going to say them both, but like, my first question is more along the lines of, how you all, and I don't, whether it's the presenters or anyone else, have had any stories of like success of kind of like how shifting your language to be a little bit broader, and less jargony has helped in your work and in your like branding. So I guess that's one question. And then the other one that's related to audience is, you all talked about this program and, funding being a challenge to kind of keep it going, which I'm assuming both funders and legislators were kind of maybe groups that needed to be targeted to try to like continue it. And I guess my question is, did you all think too, like in your messaging and communications, like I know that you were thinking about like the people you want to utilize the service, but I guess my question is like, how did your messaging around the program shift, if at all, when targeting funders and legislators? Because I'm assuming that's another audience that maybe wouldn't usually be thought about in this kind of work, but in order to sustain it, they kind of have to be brought into the picture as well. So yeah, sorry for the two really long rambling questions, but yeah.
No, not at all. I'm really glad that you brought that up. That, the use of plain language and accessible language is really, really important and not something that we mentioned in our presentation. So thank you for raising that. It is like a particular area of interest for me. Part of my job is writing a lot of website content where we're, talking to most of my work, as you can probably guess at this point, is in the substance use space. So, we're talking to a lot of different audiences, and we have to make sure that we're speaking to people in a way that they understand. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. There is, I have saved like a couple of bookmarks. That's like everyday words, that are like more focused on health. I think there's like a CDC one. So let me just grab the link for that. You basically like type in your more technical term and it'll give you more plain language. I feel like I had another one. Let's see. Oh yeah, here's the other one. Plainlanguage.gov, where you can kind of scroll through this list of jargon and see like associated plain language with it. So those are two resources that I really like and use a lot. And as for Wheels of Hope, yes, I think that so because we had this partnership with Merrimack Valley, they were the ones who originally secured the funding for it and approached us to be like, the operators of the program. So we really did a lot of the marketing to like our helpline audiences. But they did more of the work of communicating with legislators. So I know that that's something they did, but I don't have a lot of specific information about how they did that. I know that they were, you know, they would come to meetings and say like, well, we had a conversation with so-and-so about, you know, trying to support the need for extra funding. But that report that we talked about earlier, that was like a supplemental piece to an ask for funding. I know that that was more targeted towards legislators or other potential funders.
Thank you. And thanks for providing those links. I've never heard of that before, but that is incredibly helpful, just as far as the plain language and health communication of it all is
Oh, good.
concerned.
I'm glad that that is useful for people.
I also want to acknowledge Juliet's. Oh, Kara, you responded. I don't know if you want to uplift.
Yeah, I can uplift that really quick. Juliet said in the chat that though they're good at reaching their community, that's great, glad to hear that. They do struggle reaching the funding community in particular. So they struggle knowing how to rephrase to target funders. Kit, feel free to add anything. I did respond in the chat, but I think something you could focus on is just really highlighting the data, the impact of your work, and the outcomes. Emphasize the return on investment for the stakeholders, for the funders, which is basically just, you know, the value that they're going to receive from supporting you. What do they get out of it? What good comes from it? And then just, again, telling compelling stories. So nothing moves people more than hearing a narrative, hearing someone's story. So we did touch on that, I think, briefly in the presentation. And maybe you're going to get the slides, Jamia. Are you sending those out? Okay, well, you'll get the slides, but just one way to do that, you know, is ask people for stories, testimonials, people who you work with in your, you know, your everyday work, and share those stories out. And user-generated content is a really easy way to do that too. Have people film themselves or write something themselves, and then just share that out if you don't have the funding or the time to do it yourselves.
Yes, so I want to add on to that we
Sure.
really have a lot of stories. I think our struggle is always like finding the right frame, like a skeleton to sit things into. We have almost a little bit of everything, but always when it comes to what do we send out, which of the whole thing do we have? We have stories, or whether audio, whether written, whether videos, we have it all, but always the challenge of how do we categorize them rightly to be the ones to be sent to the right people? So I'm always thinking of like a skeleton that, you know how you like make a table of contents and you're like, okay, here feed in this one, here feed in that one. I feel like if we had a table of contents, I keep telling this to Jamia many times, because I have too much, but you know, when you have too much and it's still everywhere, we are struggling with having too much everywhere. And we wanna have too much, but be in the right place, I think. And this session was very good on continuing to show us how to put things in the right place, but we still wanna learn more. And so we're gonna look at the resources and continue to be more defined and more like on point or stuff like that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, yeah, really narrowing in on your target audience is going to be really important to identifying the right kind of messages. But I also want to say that like these decision makers, whether funders or policymakers, I would say they don't entirely play fair. Like that's why it feels like sometimes these strategies don't work for them. And you have to kind of, it feels like inequitable the ways in which you have to tell your story and fight for things. And I just want to ground us in that systematic issue. And so we do have to think differently about how to actually have really thoughtful and impactful messaging for those folks. And that's unfortunate. And I think that's just like maybe nonprofit industrial complex and a lot of other systems that we're dealing with. But I want to say that like the more targeted you are, the more you are able to identify the right, decision maker and get the message directly to them instead of like a broader audience of community members. And that's like a whole nother conversation, but I think this is good practice, like the channels, the audience, the SMART goals, and really thinking about how you kind of ground yourself in a marketing strategy that can then be more defined for the decision makers. So we're almost at time. If folks have other questions, you can add those to the Padlet or email Kira and Kit. I don't know if you guys just want to drop your emails in the chat. That would be great. We also have upcoming, we're going to continue talking about storytelling and the connection between evaluation and storytelling, and particularly like getting the data and the sort of compelling messaging that we want to have. We're going to be continuing those. We have I think we have an evaluation meeting at the end of this month, correct? Sorry, let me pull up this calendar.
Jimmy, I think we're not holding this month's evaluation work group meeting, but we'll be reaching out to members in an alternative way.
For the office hours part?
Oh, for the office hours. Sorry. No, yes, we do have office hours.
Okay, yeah. I'll drop that in the chat too. And finally, we do have a survey. Thank you, Ariel. Please complete the survey. You're right on time with that. So please it takes about 5 minutes, less than that, to do this survey. As you know, Lunch and Learns are a new component to our learning community space. So it's just really helpful for us to know if these are useful. We want to have like really more targeted discussions for folks that are asking for it. And so these are not required. So when you attend, we want it to be meaningful for you. And so please do complete that survey. Thank you so much to Kit and Kara. Your expertise in this space has been felt, and we appreciate the time to come and speak with us. Do you guys want to add anything else in closing?
Just thank you for having us, and thank you for your great questions and observations. I hope really that this was helpful for you. And please reach out if you have any other questions. If you don't capture our emails from the chat here, they're also in the slides that you'll be receiving. And yeah, please reach out if we can be helpful at all.
Well, thank you, everyone. Enjoy your afternoon. Stay cool. Drink water or coconut water or whatever hydrating things that you absorb into your body, because you're going to need it. So stay safe out there. Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye.